I'm James. This is my first talk, so be patient. I'm going to be talking about restrictive lectures, obviously. Generally how lectures are restrictive for people and their education. So why am I going to talk about this? From my own experiences, I never liked school. I'm sure you can all relate to that. You come in, you sit down, and you shut up. You're not allowed to speak for hours on end. You just have to sit there and listen. You're not even allowed to think about anything else. You just have to sit there and do as you're told and put your sole attention on the teacher. And this continued for about 14 years of our lives until we eventually come to university. And thankfully we have different ways of learning, which we're slowly starting to be introduced to, such as blogs and essays and group discussions. So, cheers. How are blogs restrictive? Not blogs, sorry. How are lectures restrictive? They are restrictive in many ways, mentally mainly, because you're forced to sit there for hours on end. You eventually just switch off. You get bored, and you don't think. You're a book by Bly, he couldn't find a single study to show that lectures were more effective in promoting thoughts. You just completely switch off, you pay attention onto the lecturer. Bloom only found that 1% of students were thinking about problem solving or any other form of thought, for that matter. They were just completely dumbed down, so they just sat there for about an hour doing nothing. So this could have certain impacts on people's general lives. So say they're trained to just sit down for 5 hours a day of their lives, and eventually they just become a bit, dumbed down. What happens when they come out of education? They're not going to be, able to work for themselves, look after themselves. They're not going to be very creative, which is a big topic in this subject. They're not going to be very good at problem solving. So they're just going to be coming out of education, not having a clue where they're going to go. So what else could you do to stimulate some kind of thoughts? There are class games and student debates, which have been proven to be a lot more effective than just making students sit down and be quiet. Of course, blogs are obviously a favourite. They make students think in general instead of just sit down and switch off. Cheers. Obviously, they're physically restrictive. If you're made to come in and sit down like you are now, and you do this for about 5 or 6 hours a day. And this obviously has a big impact because students could be running around, they could be doing more physical forms of education, such as maybe kind of hands-on sort of education. It's been proven that exercise has been increases neurotrophic factor BDNF, which increases brain plasticity, neuron development, all kinds of different brain developments. So if we can get children to be more active in their day, it will obviously increase more blood flow to the brain and get them going. Hypothalamus development, which is key for learning and memory, that gets stimulated again through running around. And clearly kids are being held back, and obviously you yourselves having to sit down for hours on end. You're just not getting the stimulation you need, really. You're just sitting around, kind of wasting away almost. So it could be, more active learning could be introduced into education as well. Lectures are also fundamentally bad, really. You barely remember anything from a lecture, so that's why I feel kind of relaxed, because you're probably not going to remember any of this next week. So it's not much to worry about. Without rehearsal of a lecture, you will forget about 90% of it within a week, maybe a bit longer. So what's the point? Most kids in school don't take notes until they get to about university level, and then you have to go home and learn your notes or go online and find a new way to just sit down and learn by yourself. So you don't even need to come to lectures these days because everything's online. So there's not much point really. Lectures have become out of date, and luckily people are starting to catch on to this, and they're starting to get people to be more active with the clickers and try to be humorous and have more of a student input into the lecture. But sadly, this isn't the case in schools. Children are still strictly told to sit down and be quiet and not make any interruptions. So these kids are just sitting there throughout their day and generally just becoming dumbed down, if you ask me. That's my opinion. Next one. So why are lectures still being used? Obviously, there's a lot of research to show that they're not very effective, and there are far better effective measures. They're efficient. I can relay information to, a main lecture hall is about 300 people in one time, so that saves lecturers and teachers a big, hassle, obviously, which saves, in turn, the university money, and for schools, it saves them, the government, a lot of money, which is obviously a big restrictor as well. If we had unlimited funding for education, I'm sure things would be a lot different. We'd probably have our own personal tutor. Everything would be a lot more advanced. But could we introduce this to private schools? There are a lot of rich parents out there who would be willing to throw money at their teachers, their children's teachers. So hopefully maybe private schools would have the funding to be able to introduce better forms of education. So yeah, any questions?
If you could design...
Oh, because I had my hand up. I was just going to say, you've just given us a mini lecture. Do you feel that what you've just done...
Feel hypocritical, yeah.
It's not hypocritical. Do you feel it was useless?
Well, because I'm asking you questions at the end, and I guess if you have a general interest in it, not so much. But like I said, you probably will forget most of this next week. Dan? Yeah, exactly, yeah. So it's quite hypocritical, but it's the method used.
Going to go then with lectures generally? Do you think it's going to go more to media, access to media on the internet? It's going to be maybe a better way of going that way?
The internet is a massive factor these days, like you said.
Lecturers are going to have to adapt and do things a bit different.
Yeah, well, I think they should, they are introducing it into lecture, but at schools as well, that's where things need to, as well, also change. Because kids, obviously, their teachers aren't putting things online for them to go home and read and things, and they don't take notes. So if we could get that introduced into schools, that would be a big help as well. It's just introduce that. Any more questions? Yeah.
Yeah, if you could design almost like a class or a lecture, what would you do?
Myself, I would probably just stop kids from being made to strictly sit down and switch off almost. It's useless, if you ask me. Maybe just have some kind of, like I said, some kind of class game or debate, something that just keeps them active physically and mentally, so you can keep going. Yeah.
What about here? Because you got 300.
Yeah, it's quite a difficult problem because there's such a huge amount of them, how to get them all involved. But I think blogs, like you said, they've got a good way of doing it because they do the work themselves, which keeps them mentally challenged as well. But physically, I guess people would have to be encouraged to do that in their own time. Hi.
We could have like a House of Parliament where
A kind of debate sort of session going on. It would be pretty crazy, I'd imagine, with 300 students. You'd have to have a lot of strict rules, I guess, but it could work. A mass debate of some kind. Fine. Any other questions? Sorry? Yeah. Mass debate. Yeah. Poor choice of words there. But yeah. Any more questions? Nope. Thanks.